House. I've been debating. This will probably be my third year, I believe, and I love CP. This is easily my favorite style, and I think that you guys should and will love it too. Now, one thing that's interesting to note about CP is that the most likely outcome that you're going to see for your first rounds throughout maybe the next couple of years is that you'll end up winning more op rounds than you do Gov. It's actually much more common for people to win on op and CP than it is for them to win on Gov, and there's a lot of reasons for this. It's basically, to put it as bluntly as possible, because people make cases very poorly. But I think there's a lot of ways that you guys can avoid this and you can make your cases better by following basically a few steps. So the first thing that I would advise that you guys do if you're thinking about trying to build a CP case is one of the most beneficial things that you can do is keep a list of ideas. If you think of something, writing it down is very useful because you're going to forget it later and you might want to talk to somebody about whether or not that case is a good idea. But if you guys find that you aren't able to think of ideas, if you aren't able to think of a novel or interesting CP case, the best way for you to start building your own cases and ensuring that you can run cases at tournaments that you've prepped yourself is just taking motions that have been run at previous tournaments and building those. So just a couple guides if you guys want to come up with your guidelines if you guys want to come up with your own cases that I'd suggest that you follow. Basically, I'd say that there are three really important things to consider. The first is that it has to be at least trivially interesting. If the case is really boring and you're talking about a 0.1% tax on bank transactions, you're not only going to alienate your judges, you're also putting the opposition team in an unfair position. It doesn't mean that you have to have every single one of your topics be about political science. It does mean, though, that your topic should have some impact in the world. This is the term that debaters will generally use. They call it impact. If they say your case is low impact, what that means is that your case isn't very interesting and doesn't really have any larger meaning in the real world. So try to make sure that your case is something controversial or something that is actually being debated in real life or should be debated in real life. The second thing is that it has to be fair. This kind of often goes in tandem with things, but you have to ensure the goal of making a Gov case is obviously to win. But Gov would be far too easy if you could just run cases like allow people to donate blood even if they are gay. Like that's just a clearly good case that I think that most people would win in any given circumstance. So the goal of this is trying to come up with something that is controversial, but that is so well prepped that you can still win it. And I think that you need to ensure that you're not running cases that are just true as a result of their existence, right? If your case you think literally cannot be beaten even by the best opposition team, then you're probably going to run into problems and you're going to lose rounds as a result of that. The third and the last thing that I would advise is that there's a reason that CP is different than BP. If you go to tournaments and you bring case ideas and you don't you don't think about those case ideas, you don't prep those case ideas until the 15 minutes before each round, then you're doing it wrong. You should be working on these cases at least somewhat beforehand, because the Gov advantage is that the government team gets to think about a case and they get to build a case before you ever actually hit an opposition team. You have the advantage of not only maybe having exhaustive knowledge about a topic, because maybe you're picking a case about sports and you love sports, or maybe you're picking a case about science and you love science, therefore that will give you an advantage. But if you don't prep the case beforehand, you're essentially completely abdicating any advantage that you might have to the opposition team, which you really shouldn't do. First of all, it's going to make you worse as a debater in that round, and second of all, it's going to not just be good for you competitively. I also suggested going through these case ideas, going through straight motions from previous tournaments, and using them as cases in future tournaments will help you debate better in other styles, such as BP as well. I don't think that I was very good at debate, in fact, until after I started being successful at CP, largely because I thought about topics a lot more, I prepped topics, and as a result, I learned a lot about issues that I might not otherwise have known. The last piece of advice I'd give you before I answer Amelia's question, because she has her hand raised, is that you can't build a case by yourself. If you try to build a case by yourself and you don't tell anyone about it, I'm going to almost guarantee that it's not going to go very well for you. Cases are best made when you are bouncing ideas off of other people. You should have someone that you're generally able to talk to and be like, what do you think of this idea? What do you think of this idea? Because they'll be able to, first of all, tell you when you're being an idiot, which if you are a prolific case builder, like I consider myself, you'll be told you're an idiot a lot.
I tell Brent he's an idiot at least once a week.
Yeah. So the point here is that making cases is something that is best done with someone else, because they're going to think of ideas that you never thought of. They're going to think of arguments that you never thought of, and they're going to tell you whether or not the case is unfair or not impactful or anything like that. I had one other thing, but Amelia had a question.
I just want to let you guys know that on the whole looking at old motions thing, I have a really, really long list of like every motion used at every tournament for the last like 5 years. So if you want that, email me.
But yeah, I think that it's probably good to start off using motions that were used beforehand. But I'd say that you should be trying to, even at your first tournament, maybe I'd say have 2 cases that you've used from previous motions that you've seen and that you've built, and then one that you just kind of thought of, right? One that you have an idea about and you want to try as a debate that you've never seen before. Because first of all, I think it makes debate a lot funner for you, because if you get to debate about things that you like I never get to debate about college athletes in BP, and I get to debate about it in CP, that's great for me and not so great for some of the people from your school.
Everybody in this room.
But the advantage here is that you get to debate about things that are actually interesting to you. You get to talk about them, and a lot of the times, for instance, if you aren't a poli-sci student or you aren't a philosophy student, you might sometimes feel that you're neglected by debate because they don't get to talk as often about the issues that you might like. There are rarely science topics. I know that to be a fact. There are very rarely sports topics. There are very rarely a lot of these topics. CP allows you to debate your niche interests, and I think that's probably very good. The last piece of advice that I just remember after Amelia said is that when you are building cases, I don't think it is enough to just say, this is the side of the case that I am going to advocate, and then I'm going to build this side. If you completely neglect what the other team is going to say to your case, you're going to walk into every round basically having it be a firing squad, because you're not going to have any idea what the opposition team is going to say. I'd also suggest to you that prepping both sides of the motion will give you an idea of which one you find more compelling, and will give you a better chance to run maybe the better side of the motion. Prepping both sides, you don't necessarily have to prep both sides equally, but don't think of motions just as, this is how I'm going to run this case, and I don't really need to think about the op arguments, because the op arguments are silly. If the op arguments are silly, you shouldn't be running the case. I have a bunch of case ideas. I've been doing this for a while. If you guys have any specific questions about whether a case idea is good, how to specifically go about case writing, you can talk to me at any time. You can add me on Facebook. I don't really care if I haven't met you before. I'm cool with that. And I hope that was at least somewhat educational.